Hello everyone, welcome to the second part of this time-lapse video tutorial on the painting, the coloring process. If you haven't watched the first video, you may want to watch that first. The link is in the video description below. For the sky that I have just painted, it was painted with French ultramarine mixed with a little bit of cerulean blue. I had to wet the paper surface first before I paint the blues because I want to have the paint diffuse softly into certain areas of the paper. Now for the gray tones that I'm painting now, that's mixed with French ultramarine and burnt sienna. Sometimes I would also mix gray tones with cerulean blue and burnt sienna. If you mix it with French ultramarine, you're going to get a darker gray. With cerulean blue, the gray is going to be a bit lighter. For this particular sketch, I'm actually painting with a limited color palette because, well, it's easier to paint with a limited color palette. I don't have to worry too much about using too many colors. I don't have to worry about color harmony. So I try to paint the big shapes first using a gray wash with this ultramarine and burnt sienna mix. Now as the wash is still wet, sometimes I like to charge in some colors like some extra blue or maybe some burnt sienna into the wet areas to have that color variation in the wash. If you're just painting a flat wash, it's going to look a bit boring because it's flat. But when you have color transition within the wash, it's going to look more interesting. So here I'm painting the red windows with red paint. I'm actually not sure what red paint that was because this tutorial video was actually recorded a few weeks ago. I have forgotten about, I cannot remember the colors that I actually used other than ultramarine and burnt sienna. But that red probably is quinacridone red since it's in this particular palette that I am using. So now I'm painting the blues and adding some more shadows on the side walls here. For the darker areas, the shadow areas that are quite dark, that are close to black, that's a concentrated wash of ultramarine and burnt sienna. For the greens in the background, it looks like phthalo green. Phthalo green is great for painting trees that are very dark. You know, there are two types of green. There is the sunny green, the yellow green, and then there's the green that is under the tree. Those greens that are under the tree, that are in shadow, those are best painted with phthalo green. And now I am applying a second layer of wash onto the first layer to get basically to make the road a bit darker because it's a bit light. And I'm also using the same wash to add in extra shadow details to give the sketch more dimensionality, to make the form stand out a bit more. So far I'm just painting with the big shapes. I'm not using a lot of colors. You can see it's just blue, red and grays. Now for the signboards later on, I'll be using more vibrant colors. And for the people, notice in the reference photo there are a lot of people, but I did not draw them for the pen and ink sketch because I wanted to draw them later on at the later stage using the Derwent Line Painter. I want to overlap those tourists or the people or the activity onto the watercolor sketch that I have just painted. So I'm going to start with this particular color. This is the Derwent Line Painter. This particular color is called Clockwork, and well, sometimes when you're drawing with this pen, the ink would actually leak out from the top. And if the ink doesn't flow, you have to press down the tip to force the ink to flow. But if you press down too many times, the ink would actually rush out like what's happening right here. So I have to go back and sort of correct the mistake to basically dab out the ink with my tissue. So this ink does not look as opaque as I wanted. You can see some of the black lines, they still show through behind the orange ink. And this yellow colored ink is definitely not opaque enough. It still has some contrast against the gray wash behind, but the line is not strong enough. This style of drawing, I mean, if you want to have the opaque lines overlap whatever that is behind, it may probably be better to draw this digitally, unless you can find colored ink pens or line painters that really feature opaque ink. So you definitely need the right tools for the right job. I'm drawing in this style because I was inspired by this artist called Carlos Stengar. His illustrations are very beautiful and he likes to use opaque ink over his watercolor washes. So that's why I was inspired by him to try out this particular style, and it doesn't look like it's working here. So the Derwent line painters, they don't really work, and I've just switched over to using the Dr. P.H. Martin's India ink, and this India ink is not opaque enough as well, so I've got to switch back to using the Derwent line painter. Drawing to me is a hobby, it's just for fun, it's to help me relax. So if I cannot get the result that I want, it's alright, because I'm still having a lot of fun drawing, and I also learn a lot from my own mistakes. In this case, I tried to draw with opaque ink and I learned that it's not possible with this particular brand of pen. So I may need to look online for other opaque inks. Now for this building in the background, which is sort of like a hotel, so I painted with watercolor and then I'm adding the lines on top of the watercolor. Now notice how striking those lines are. If you were to draw the lines first and then paint over with watercolor, the contrast wouldn't be that strong. Sometimes you want the contrast to be strong, sometimes you don't want it to be that strong, so it's really up to you. Alright, so this is pretty much the completed sketch. Just like the first part of this time-lapse video, this is actually created from a full-length tutorial that I have made for my patrons. So if you want to watch the tutorial at full length at normal speed, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the video description below. Here's a close-up on the sketch, and you can see that this watercolor paper, it performs really well with pen and ink and watercolor. This is the indigo art papers that I bought on Amazon. Alright, so that's all for today's tutorial. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching. I hope you support me on Patreon. See you in the next video. Bye!